Since you're standing there, make yourself useful. Begin the presentation.
The night Corinne Ellison was told to carry a tray of champagne at her own husband's gala was the same night she decided Marcus Vail would never recover from underestimating her again. Nobody in the ballroom knew that yet. They only saw a quiet black woman in a simple black dress standing near the grand staircase of the St. Clair Crown Hotel in downtown Atlanta. Her natural hair swept into smooth low bun, a thin gold bracelet circling her wrist, and no diamonds anywhere on her body. In a room full of women dripping in designer gowns and men boasting loudly over old money and new contracts, Corinne looked too calm, too modest, too ordinary to matter. That was the mistake. At 42, Corinne Ellison had built a fortune most of the people in that room could not even imagine. She was the founder of a private investment firm hidden behind layered trusts, the silent controlling owner of 3 medical real estate developments across the South, and the anonymous majority stakeholder in the very company her husband bragged about running. Years earlier, after selling a healthcare software empire for more than $1 billion, Corinne had learned a hard lesson. People smelled money. They stopped seeing your heart and started measuring your worth by what they could take. So she's appear from the spotlight. She kept her name off magazine covers. She used her late mother's maiden name in business. She donated through foundations no one could trace back to her. And when she married Marcus Vail, a polished cardiologist with a dazzling smile and a hunger for status, she made the decision that would later save her life. She never told him the full truth about her wealth. At first, Marcus had admired her simplicity. He said she felt real, grounded, different from the women who chased labels and cameras. But admiration turned into irritation the moment his career started rising and her quiet dignity stopped serving his ego. Marcus wanted a wife who looked expensive, spoke less, smiled on cue, and never reminded him that grace didn't need applause. Corinne, with her stillness and intelligence, made him feel smaller than he could admit, and little by little he began treating her as if she were a burden he had outgrown. His mother, Odessa Vail, treated her worse. Odessa never forgave Marcus for marrying a woman from the neighborhood, as she liked to say with a smile too sharp to be kind. Odessa wore her wealth like armor and judged everybody by fabric, address, and bloodline. She had never believed Corinne belonged in their family. In Odessa's eyes, Corinne's elegance was invisible because it wasn't loud. She didn't care that Corinne was educated, composed, and generous. All she saw was a woman who didn't flaunt wealth, and therefore, to her, couldn't possibly have any. For 12 years, Corinne had endured the little cuts, the backhanded comments, the patronizing introductions, the way Odessa would hand her coats to hold during family events, as if she were staff, the way Marcus never corrected her, the way he laughed too softly when his mother called Corinne sweet but socially unfinished. But the humiliations had become harder to ignore after Simone Reed entered the picture. Simone was Marcus' new public relations director, beautiful, the Vail Heart and Wellness Institute. Sharp, tongued, and always polished down to her manicured fingertips. Corinne noticed the change before she found the proof. Marcus stayed out later, his phone tilted away from her. He started criticizing the way she dressed, the way she spoke, the way she failed to represent him properly at elite events. He began speaking to her like a man embarrassed by his own wife. Then came the messages. Corinne had not gone looking for scandal. Marcus had fallen asleep on the couch one Sunday afternoon, his phone buzzing again and again on the glass coffee table. A preview flashed across the screen. Can't wait until she's out of the way. Tonight was almost worth pretending. Corinne had stared at that sentence until every bone in her body turned cold. She unlocked nothing. She confronted nobody. She cried only once, in the privacy of her closet, hand pressed over her mouth so the sound wouldn't come out. Then she became very quiet. Because Corinne had not spent 20 years building empires by reacting before she'd understood the battlefield. In 72 hours, her attorney, Miriam Chase, had initiated a discreet investigation. A forensic counting team traced unusual transfers through Marcus Institute. A private investigator documented Mark's and Simone in private suites exchanging gifts and discussing the final push before the gala. And what they uncovered was bigger than infidelity. Marcus wasn't just cheating, was stealing. Funds from a community health grant had been rerouted through shell vendors connected to Simone's cousin. Marketing expenses had been inflated. A salting contract had been issued to a fake wellness firm quietly managed by Odessa Vale. On paper it looked like bad bookkeeping. In reality, it was a family operation, slick, arrogant, and reckless enough to believe no one would ever check. But the money they were stealing came from a philanthropic medical expansion, fund seeded by one source above all others. Corinne. Tonight's gala was supposed to celebrate the launch of a $75 million Odessa campus in South Atlanta. A project Marcus had positioned as his crowning achievement. He had spent months giving interviews about vision, legacy, and service. What he never knew was that the project existed because Corinne had approved the funding herself through the Ellison-Cole's trust. And tonight, in front of 200 donors, cecidas, physicians, influencers, and local press, Marcus planned to ask the board to name the new wing after his father. He had no idea that by the end of the night, he would be lucky if they didn't remove his name from the building entirely. Corinne arrived at the gala alone because Marcus had said he would. Her there. She stepped out of a town car instead of the chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce he preferred to display. She wore no couture gown, only a sleek black dress fitted cleanly to her body, and a pair of understated heels. On her wrist was her mother's bracelet, the one thing she wore whenever she needed to remember who she was before success, before marriage, before betrayal. When she entered the ballroom, she saw at once what Marcus had done. Simone was already at his side. Not hovering nearby, not standing among the staff, at his side. She wore a silver gown with a slit up the thigh and the smug expression a woman who thought she had already won. Marcus leaned toward her as photographers snapped pictures. Odessa stood nearby in emerald silk please, as a queen mother presenting her chosen replacement. A few members of the board mingled near the stage, laughing over champagne, while a giant LED screen displayed the logo for the Vale Heart and Wellness Institute. Corinne had barely taken 3 steps in the room when Odessa saw her. "Oh," Odessa said loudly, eye sweeping over Corinne's dress. "You came like that?" Several heads turned. Corinne kept her voice even. "Good evening to you too, Odessa." Odessa gave a brittle smile. "We're hosting investors, not attending Bible study." A couple standing nearby tried not to react. Simone smirked into her glass. Marcus finally turned and saw Corinne. For a second, guilt flickered across his face, then pride buried it. "You're late," he said, though she wasn't. "I'm right on time." He glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. "Listen, don't make this difficult tonight. We need everything to go smoothly." Corinne looked from him to Simone, and back again. Smooth for whom? Before Marcus could answer, Simone stepped in with false sweetness. "Corinne, there you are. We were just saying the service team is short one hostess in the reception section. For a second, with that black dress, I thought maybe you were helping with the floor team." Ripple laughter passed through 2 women standing behind her. Marcus should have shut it down right there. He didn't. Instead he sighed as if Corinne herself were the inconvenience. Please don't start. Just find a seat and keep a low profile tonight, all right? This event is important. That was strike one. Strike two came 10 minutes later, when overheard Simone telling a donor's wife that Marcus had been carrying his marriage out of loyalty, and that some women never learn how to evolve. The wife looked Corinne up and down, with the pity reserved for women already being replaced in public. Strike three came when Odessa, in front of a cluster of guests, held out an empty champagne flute toward Corinne and said, "Since you're just standing there, be useful and bring me another." The room didn't freeze dramatically, no music stopped, no one gasped. That made it worse. The insult slid in the air almost naturally, wrapped in old-class arrogance and new cruelty. A few people looked away, others watched openly. Marcus was only a few feet away. He heard it. He did nothing. Corinne stared at the glass in Odessa's hand, then slowly lifted her eyes to Marcus. He shrugged. That tiny movement, cowardly, dismissive, effortless, ended whatever still lived between them. Corinne took the glass, but not because she was obeying. She handed it to a passing server instead, then turned and walked toward the back of the ballroom with the steady grace of a woman who had just made a decision no one else was prepared for. 8:05, the formal program began. Marcus took the stage first, charming and confident in a midnight tuxedo, his smile polished for cameras. He spoke about healing communities, honoring families, expanding access, and building a legacy in Atlanta. People applauded. Simone watched him like a disciple. Odessa glowed with pride. Then Marcus shifted tone. "There's also a personal announcement I feel is only right to make tonight," he said, holding the microphone with theatrical heaviness. "Many of you know that my wife and I have had challenges. Sometimes people grow apart. Sometimes one person refuses to step into the future the other is trying to build." A murmur moved through the room. Corinne sat silently at a rear table, hands folded in her lap. Emboldened by performance. His own performance. "I spent years carrying possibilities that should never have fallen to me alone. And while I won't shame anyone, I do believe honesty matters. So tonight, I'm announcing that Corinne and I will be divorcing." The room exploded into whispers. Marcus extended a hand towards Simone, who rose gracefully and joined him on stage. "I'm also proud to introduce the woman who has truly stood beside me in building this institute's future, our Director of Public Relations, Simone Reed." That when even the people who had been politely neutral realized they were witnessing something ugly. Corinne heard chairs shift, heard the sharp intake of breath from an older nurse seated 2 tables over, heard somebody mutter, "Lord have mercy." But most she heard her own height, slow, deliberate, controlled. Marcus looked straight at her from the stage. "I hope we can handle this with dignity, Corinne." Dignity. After public betrayal. After humiliation. After theft. Corinne rose from her chair. The ballroom grew still in a different way now, because something in her expression made people stop whispering. She did not look broken. She did not look shocked. She did not look like a discarded wife. She looked dangerous. Walked toward the stage in complete silence, heels clicking softly across marble. Marcus' confidence trembled just a little. Simone crossed her arms. Odessa narrowed her eyes, already offended by the audacity of Corinne, refusing to shrink. When Corinne reached the stage, she did not ask Marcus for the microphone. She looked past him towards the technical booth. "Go ahead," she said. A second later, the giant screen behind Marcus flickered. His smile vanished. The Institute logo disappeared and was replaced by a spreadsheet of wire transfers. Large red circles highlight vendor payments, shell accounts, and fraudulent disbursements. Then came photographs, Marcus entering a hotel with Simone, Marcus kissing Simone in a Brax SUV. Odessa signed Kissel authorizations. Simone discussing moving the grant money before they audit. Audio clips began to play through the speakers. Marcus' voice filled the ballroom first. "As long as Corinne stays clueless, we're fine. She's too soft to challenge anything." Then Simone's voice. "Once the divorce is public, we can clean up the rest. The old woman's already handling her piece." Then, Odessa. "That girl should be grateful she had Marcus this long." The crowd erupted. Gasps, shouts, phone lifted. Board members stood up. One donor's wife covered her mouth. A city councilman cursed under his breath. Marcus lunged toward Corinne, but hotel security stepped forward before he reached her. "Cut it off," he shouted toward the booth. Corinne took the microphone at last. "Let it play." Evident followed: embezzled funds, forged invoice, internal emails, and one devastating document after another. Then the final slide appeared. Owner's structure: Vail Medical Development Group. Under majority shareholder, one name glowed across the screen: Corinne Ellison-Cole. The silence that followed felt like thunder waiting to break. Marcus turned pale. Simone blinked fast, confusion overtaking arrogance. Odessa looked as if the floor had opened beneath her. Corinne faced the crowd, voice clear and unshaking. "Since my husband decided honesty matters tonight, let me offer the full version. My name is Corinne Ellison-Cole. I am the founder of the Ellison-Cole Health Trust, the lead private funder of this medical campus, and through holding companies managed by Chase and Bell Advisory, I am also the controlling shareholder of Vail Medical Development Group." A sound moved through the room, like a shock wave. Marcus whispered, "What?" Corinne turned to him, not with rage, but with that cold, lethal calm only betrayed women and seasoned CEOs ever truly master. "You heard me." She continued, addressing the crowd. "For 12 years, I tolerated disrespect in private. For the last 6 months, I document fraud in silence. The grant money intended for underserved black communities in Atlanta was stolen by very people stand on this stage, pretending to care about service." She looked at Simone. "You mistook elegance for weakness." Then at Odessa, "You mistook simplicity for poverty." Then finally at Marcus, "And you mistook my silence for ignorance." The board chair, a stern older black woman named Dr. Lenora Pitts, stood from the front row. "Is this documentation verified?" Miriam Chase, Corinne's attorney, stepped forward from the side aisle with 2 federal financial investigators and a stack of sealed folders. "It is," she said. "We have forensic accounting reports, sworn statements, transfer records, and supporting evidence already submitted to the proper authorities." Marcus' knees almost gave out. "This is a setup," Simone snapped, but nobody cared anymore. "Its consequences," Corinne replied. Dr. Pitts wasted no time. In front of everyone, she announced an emergent suspension of Marcus Vail and Simone Reed pending criminal and civil investigation. The board voted on the spot to freeze institute accounts. One by one, donors began stepping away from Marcus, as if disgrace were contagious. Then came the blow Marcus never saw coming. Corinne reached into slim black portfolio and removed a document. And as for the divorce, she said, "Let's be accurate there too." She held the paper up just enough for the photographs in the room to catch it. "The prenuptial amendment Marcus intended to use against me is invalid. It contains a forged witness signature and undisclosed asset manipulation. Also, the penthouse he'd to remove me from was purchased through a property trust owned solely by me. So no, Marcus, I won't be leaving my home. You will." The ballroom broke into stunned applause. Not polite applause. The kind born from relief, vindication, and the electric satisfaction of watching a cruel man finally meet a stronger one. Marcus' face twisted between panic and fury. "Corinne, wait baby. Listen, we can talk about this." She looked at him as if he were a stranger who had wandered on her property. "Don't call me that." Odessa tried one last desperate turn. "Corinne, sweetheart, families work through things." "No, families don't humiliate, exploit, and rob each other while smiling for cameras. Simone started backing away, but one of the investigators stopped her near the stairs. Marcus protested as security moved closer, his voice cracking now, stripped of all charm. Around him, guests recorded every second. The same people who had laughed when Corinne was mistaken, staff, were now staring at her, like she had transformed into something untouchable. The truth was she had. Not because she was a billionaire, but because she had finally stopped asking broken people to treat her with care. As Marcus and Simone were escorted from the ballroom, the giant screen behind the stage changed one final time. The name of the metal campus had been updated. The Corinne Ellison Community Heart Center. Dr. Pitts looked at Corinne and nodded. If you are still willing, we would be honored to continue this project under your leadership. Corinne's eyes shimmered for the first time all night, but her voice remained steady. Yes, but the mission changes tonight. Every dollar stolen will be repaid. Every scholarship delayed will be restored. And every family this institute was supposed to serve will come before vanity, before ego, and before men who use service as a costume. The applause this time thundered through the ballroom. Not for scandal. For justice. By midnight, clips of the gala were everywhere. Atlanta blogs called it the social implosion of the year. Local news ran the footage of Marcus' speech beside the evidence reveal. Its comment sections filled with praise for Corinne's composure and fury toward the people who had humiliated her. Old church ladies who had once worried was too patient were now calling her a vessel of divine timing. Young women posted her lines with captions about self-respect and quiet power. And Marcus? By morning, he had lost his board position, his sponsorships, and his access to joint accounts. His mother's consulting records were under review. Simone's public image disintegrated overnight. The people who once crowded around Marcus for access suddenly couldn't answer his calls fast enough. Corinne, meanwhile, slept 8 straight hours for the first time in months. A week later, she stood on the balcony of her penthouse, with Atlanta glowing her anther, a cup of coffee warming her hands. Miriam joined her with an update file tucked under one arm. Criminal inquiry is moving quickly, Miriam said. Civil recovery too, they're done. Corinne nodded once. Good. Miriam studied her. How'd you feel? Corinne looked out at the city she had quietly poured so much into. The neighborhoods where her grants funded maternal health vans. The schools where her scholarships paid tuition. The clinics she kept alive while men like Marcus claimed the credit. I feel, she said, too many years flying where people committed to unsustained it. So, Miriam smiled faintly. And now? Corinne took a breath. Now they can watch from outside. 3 months later, the Corinne Ellison Community Heart Center broke ground with new leadership, full transparency, and renewed mission focused on Black families, too often ignored by polished healthcare systems. Corinne gave a brief speech at the ceremony. She wore white that day, simple and radiant, with her mother's bracelet catching sunlight at her wrist. Marx watched the coverage from a rented condo on the other side of the city. Corinne never thought about him long enough to care. Because revenge, she learned, was sweetest when it wasn't loud. When it wasn't screaming or chasing or begging to be understood. Oh, real revenge was building something greater while the people who tried to minute you collapse under the weight of their own greed. They had mocked her plain dress. They had mistaken her for the help. They had laughed because she didn't wear her power on her body. But power had never needed sequins. It had lived in her patience, in her restraint, in her timing. And, when the night finally came to reveal it, Corinne Ellison did not just expose the people who betrayed her. She reminded every person in that room that the most dangerous woman is not the loudest one. It's the quiet one who already owns the building.